Welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 138 with Mary Roach. The Art of Adventure is the podcast that helps you travel the world, run your business, and embark on an epic quest. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. Head on over to derekloudermilk.com to check out the show notes and sign up for the Art of Adventure newsletter, which gets you the latest episodes, articles, and reading recommendations. I'd like to say thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for supporting the Art of Adventure and making this show possible. If you'd like to donate and become a patron of the show, you can go to patreon.com/Derek Loudermilk. And I want to mention the Art of Adventure Adventure Quest in Bali, September 2016. This is a trip that I would like to see one of you, well, more than one of you. I have 4 spots available for you guys. This is a small group. We're going to spend time in nature, getting to know ourselves, learning the secret parts of Bali, the canyons, the waterfalls, the mountains, the rainforest that not many people know about. And the whole point is to set ourselves up for dramatic self-realization in the fashion of a Native American vision quest. I'm super excited about it. If you want to know more, go to derekloudermilk.com/adventurequest. Today on the podcast, I interview a hero of mine. I'm a big fan of New York Times bestselling author Mary Roach, and we're going to talk about her new book, Grunt: The Curious Science of Humans at War. We're going to talk about some of the gross science behind keeping soldiers alive, such as military fashion and hearing technology, the use of maggots to clean wounds. We talk about penis transplants and also the potential for full body transplants or head transplants. The discussion ranges into diarrhea on special ops mission. And one of my favorite things about this episode is there's a mid-interview brainstorming session that we get into where we're coming up with new book topic ideas for Mary. And so this is a really fun episode, partly because I have a bit of a science background. I've read all of her work. She's super funny, has great stories. I think that you guys are going to love her and this interview. So here you go. Here is Mary Roach. Welcome back to the Art of Adventure, and I am so thrilled today that one of my favorite authors, Mary Roach, is joining me. Welcome to the podcast, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you.
For the listener, Mary is the author of several books. The first one that I read was Packing for Mars, which is pretty descriptive in the title about what it would take to go to Mars. Bonk, Stiff, Spook, great one-word titles. I also really liked Gulp, which is about the digestive tract. I read it while I was a microbiology grad student, and some of the things I was studying was the human gut microbiome. And I think there was a chapter in that book about fecal transplants, which was cool. And then she also has Grunt, which is her latest book. It just came out earlier in June. And that's all about, what's the subtitle? Maybe
Curious Science of Humans at War.
Humans at War.
Yeah.
And so the underlying theme, which I guess everyone else realized long before I did, is that you talk about human bodies and you talk about gross things and you talk about, I don't know, just all this biology relating to the human body. Is that accurate?
Yeah. The human body, and sometimes the human body in extreme, unusual circumstances like space. I think that Grunt is the closest parallel would be Packing for Mars in my books. Gulp is just kind of a fun trip down the canal,
Yeah.
Just sort of stopping along the way in random places. But this book and Packing for Mars are more about putting bodies into sort of extreme situations and the science behind that.
Yeah. Actually, I quote, maybe my friends get annoyed at me, but I save facts from your books quite regularly, like the did you know sort of party information. Like when someone bites down on a grain of sand, I remember like your jaw can sense the difference in density and stop at a moment's notice.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Yeah, like if you're chewing a peanut and you bite down on it, and like the second it gives way, like your jaw senses that and adjusts the pressure. Otherwise, your teeth would slam together and break. You know, so you have this it's like a automatic braking system in a car. You know, it just automatically does that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, fascinating. And so, because you have this general theme around bodies and often weird or gross things, are you on the lookout for topics that have the potential for a lot of grossness when you think about writing a book?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think because Stiff was my first book, and still is kind of the one most people have read and liked, I think that kind of set me on this path to keep supplying more books that cover kind of either gross or taboo. It isn't just that. What I like about gross things, whether they're maggots or I don't, you name it, I like to take people from the point of saying, ew, that's gross, to I thought that was just going to be gross, but it was kind of fascinating. Kind of turn some of that revulsion into awe, maybe, or respect, because bodies are pretty. I mean, they're gross, but they're also really amazing.
Yeah, I totally get that. I sort of imagine that is how doctors progress as they go through medical school. Like maybe first there's, first time they see surgery or first time they're seeing all these body fluids that are kind of like, I don't like that. It's not natural. And then by the end, they're like, oh, whatever. I see that every day. And it's totally cool and fun.
Yeah, and I think it happens really fast. I mean, the first time I was in a room with a bunch of cadavers was a plastic surgery head practice. They were practicing on heads, that is to say, plastic and reconstructive surgeons. And you walk in and you're initially like, oh my God, there's like 20 severed heads in this room, and it's really weird and it's really grotesque. But then maybe I'm weird, but within 10 minutes, your kind of freak out mode has shifted to fascination, because you're learning, what are people doing? What are they learning? How are they doing it? So that happened at the Body Farm with Stiff, which is, that's probably the grossest place that I've ever been. They study human decomposition. It's a forensics facility. But the person showing me around was so, it's like showing me the different stages of decomposition and what's going on and what breaks down first, and where the bacteria go first. And then you get, they're emitting gases. So there's bloating. And so anyway, but it was so interesting that you kind of quickly forget about the fact that it is objectively off-putting scenario. Yeah.
Well, here's something that I've encountered around curiosity. I feel like curiosity is a cure for a lot of things, whether it's queasiness or even in, I would say, like world peace or any sort of like disagreement in a relationship. If you are, rather than like holding on to what you want to hold on to, if you are curious about the other person or the other thing, then it sort of like pushes away these preconceived notions and you just get super interested in what you're learning. Yeah,
exactly. Because you come, I think it's tied in with ignorance in a way, like not ignorance as in you're an ignorant idiot, but when you don't know the details about something and all you have is a preconceived notion, you're reacting just to that. But suddenly you have all this other information, and it's really interesting, and you understand why these things are happening and what they mean. And yeah, exactly. You have a conversation with somebody that you never sat down to dinner with. All of a sudden you see it from a perspective. You see that it's really a nuanced situation, that both people are right and both people have valid opinions, and it's so much more complicated than you realized coming just at it with your preconceived either fear or revulsion or anger. That starts to break down. Like I think there's some kind of a criminal justice strategy where you sit the victim down with the perpetrator and they have a conversation. And I think and they both come away with some understanding. The victim, for robbery, I'm saying, I don't know, perhaps murder too, but they start to understand the circumstances that led to that person committing that crime, how that person felt justified for the robbery or whatever it was. And I just, that can't help but make this situation better for both sides.
Wow. That's phenomenal. What are you curious about these days?
Oh, these days I'm in full on non-curious, just, talking about the book. I'm sharing the things that I was curious about for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't know what the next book will be. You'd think there'd be like an infinite number of human body related topics. And I don't know, it may be time for some radical reinvention. Maybe I won't write about the human body. Maybe I'll, I don't know, branch out and do something different. Though what that would be, I don't know. That's always a scary proposition,
Well, I mean, J.K. Rowling had to do it. So,
yeah. Maybe I'll have to change my name. Change my byline anyway.
I was patiently waiting for you to write another book so that I could get the chance to have you on the show. And it seems to be, I don't know, a couple of year cycle from the time between your last book and the next book. So I'm really curious about the process of writing books, and you go and you talk to lots of people and you spend time observing scientists, speaking with a lot of scientists. And one thing that I find myself wondering is just, how do you find the right people to talk to?
I spend the first 3 months or so of a new book project just writing to people, poking around on the internet, trying to find places, almost like a documentary filmmaker would do. I'm looking for places to go where something might be happening that I could observe and write about. And there'd be characters and dialogue, but I don't meet those characters until I get there, which I think suggests that most people, when you start to ask them questions about what they know a lot about, most people are really interesting, fascinating individuals to talk to. I mean, I don't screen them, to make sure they're going to be quotable or funny or eccentric. It's really just I'm making my decision based on what I'll be able to see and observe and do. And it's so rare that the person, him or herself, hasn't ended up being a really interesting individual. I think just scientists in general are pretty interesting people. To me, anyway.
Yeah. And I wonder, because I don't think you have a science degree, is it easy enough to understand what they're talking about all the time?
No, not always. I wish I had a bit of a background, particularly in physiology and biochem. It would make my job easier in a way. But I'm pretty shameless about just asking somebody to back up and explain the basics to me. I kind of treat my sources as unpaid tutors. I'm pretty shameless about can you just explain the bends? Just like what is going on? Why the bubbles? What do the bubbles do? And what? Okay, no, go back. I'm really sorry. Go back. I'm so sorry. I still don't understand. I do a lot of that, and I've lost all sense of embarrassment about that. And I think, although that does slow me down and it puts me in a constant state of anxiety as to whether I've truly have understood the material in a way that is read the book accurately. So there's a bit of anxiety there. For that reason, I have someone read, somebody who does have a background in science, that particular science, read those sections, read the book, etc. So I don't kind of have one of those smack your head, oh my God, she didn't realize, that kind of moment.
Sure.
So, but the one thing about not having a detailed background is that it, my sense of wonder that you have when you first come to a subject is still very much intact. And my sense of wonder is at the basic level. I mean, I'm not, because people who study and research these things still have this sense of wonder, but it is, down to the molecular level or gene expression, or, the stuff that excites them is stuff that is beyond the average reader and me. So I can possibly relate to my readers a little bit better in that we both are coming at it from the sort of the same point of near utter ignorance. I don't mean to say everybody else is nearly utterly ignorant, but not, when you talk about a really specific topic, most people have just a little understanding of it. And I'm coming from that same place.
As a former scientist, and I was researching extremophile viruses in Yellowstone hot springs, and people would say, "Oh, wow, that sounds really cool." But then as soon as I would start to explain more of the details, they'd be like, the eyes would glaze over, and I'd be like, okay, I need to really just share what's exciting and not the nitty-gritty.
Because what's exciting for you is not exciting. They can't keep up. So not having the background is both a challenge and a blessing.
Yeah, so it puts science writers and science communicators in a really privileged spot of essentially being a translator, and you do that with your curiosity and also with humor, which I really appreciate. I find myself wondering, and we'll get into the book here soon, Grunt, because I want to talk a lot about that. You have these little observations, like someone's last name will be like comedically, the spelling will be like, I can't think of an example, but it's part of their career or something.
Oh yeah. Like when I was talking about in Gulp, there was a saliva chapter, and I was talking about how the enzymes in saliva are the same enzymes in laundry detergent because the things you eat are the things you spill on your shirt. So I call the Soap and Detergent Association, and they say, we're going to put you in touch with Dr. Louis Spitz, when his name is Spitz. And then I talk to Spitz, and nobody but me finds this amusing. Dr. Spitz, I call him up, and he goes, "Oh, well, I do soap. I don't do detergent. You need to speak to Keith Grime." Keith Grime about, detergent. And that happened over and over in that book. I wasn't really looking for that stuff. I mean, the guy who did my first and only colonoscopy, the gastroenterologist, his name is Dr. Turdiman. Turdiman.
Wow.
Turdiman.
And so does your mind just sort of naturally like create humorous observations while you're going through the process of living, and then you just sort of put it down into words in the book?
Yeah, but it doesn't. Wouldn't anybody who went to see a gastroenterologist that found it, is it just me, or don't everybody go like, seriously, your name is Dr. Turdiman? I don't know. Maybe I'm just really immature. But for whatever reason, my mind does go there, particularly with something as obvious as somebody's name. There just were a lot of them for that book for some reason. Not this book, but a lot.
Yeah. Okay, I want to transition into talking about Grunt because this is fascinating.
Sure.
And some of my favorite parts were the actors that were acting out the battle scene. I'm just going to mention a few things and we can sort of pick and choose.
Sure.
Obviously, genitalia transplants and the potential for a full body transplant was a wild topic. The diarrhea, obviously, as a traveler to developing countries myself, an interesting topic. And the maggots in the wounds, that was kind of gross.
Yep.
So was there one chapter that you were just, didn't expect to be so excited about, but found yourself just really enthralled with the subject?
The penis transplant chapter, and this was 2 years ago. I had no idea this was in the works. I was at Walter Reed Medical Center reporting on some reconstructive work. And I said, what else is coming up? Are there any new developments? And the surgeon just kind of, and he says it the way you'd go like, oh, would you like fries with your burger? He's like, oh yeah, they're doing some cadaver work on a transplant. I'm like, what? Really? Wait a minute. Cadaver work when you say transplant, you mean penis transplant. And this was, like I said, it was 2 years ago. So there was really nothing about it out there. So, and then I was able to go to the cadaver lab, which of course for the stiff fans was very, very exciting to have some cadavers on the scene. So that was fascinating because I've never been, I mean, I've written about how when come up with a new technique, they do a few run-throughs on cadavers. That's one of the things cadavers are incredibly helpful for. So you don't want to give it a whirl on somebody on whom things might go wrong. Yeah. So that was so interesting to be there because they were trying to figure out and which arteries and veins do we need to reattach. So they had this IV bag of blue fluid. It looked like, blood from an alien movie. It was this bright blue fluid. And they were hooking it up to a cadaver artery in the pelvic region. And then they would let the blue flow, and you would see this sort of bruise unfolding in real time. Just not real time, but like instant bruise appearing.
Yeah.
And that let them know, okay, this is an important artery because it feeds this whole area. So we really need to concentrate on that one. Make sure we reattach that one. So to be there for that process, which I hadn't been able to do for stiff, that was so interesting. Really cool. Yeah.
And so what's the status on penis transplants?
Well, the first one happened about 3-4 weeks ago, and it didn't happen. I was at Johns Hopkins, and the first one happened at Mass General Hospital, and I had no idea that they were also looking into doing a transplant at the same time. The surgeons at Johns Hopkins, the recipient is a veteran. They hadn't found a donor yet, but the folks at Mass General, it was a cancer patient. And I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard a follow-up recently, but I assume everything went okay, that it was a success. The first penis transplant was done in China in 2006, and that was not a success. That penis was removed after
Rejected
2 weeks.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Well, they said it was not. They didn't say it was a rejection issue. They said it was an extreme psychological issue, and they didn't say if it was the man, his wife, something about his wife. But surgeons that I know, I don't know exactly what happened. I wish they'd been more forthcoming with their details in their paper, but they weren't. That's sort of all they said. The surgeons that I spoke to said they looked at the photo. It looked like there was some necrosis, the dead tissue that they hadn't hooked up the arteries that they needed to hook up to perfuse the whole area.
Yeah.
So anyway, it didn't work, and they didn't try it again, so far as I know, over there.
It makes me wonder how close we are to being able to add, animal body parts like from animals onto humans. Like I always thought it'd be cool to have an extra set of orangutan arms or something like that.
I was wondering whose penis you were thinking.
Oh, well, obviously the barnacle.
Oh, yeah, or the tapir.
Or the tapir.
The tapir has a penis that unrolls like a party blower. Those little things you blow.
Yeah, that would be really useful for New Year's Eve.
Exactly.
Let's
Watch
see
this.
Where were we?
I don't know. Transplants.
Yeah, transplants. And okay, so I'm actually I'm meeting my girlfriend's family, and her brother-in-law was in the military, and so I actually learned a lot about the military from this book, which was helpful in connecting, talking specifics about MRAPs and whatnot. And the way I described this book to him was, all of the various costs and technology that goes into keeping soldiers alive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I not the killing, but the keeping alive is a good way to describe the book. But the things that fall through the cracks of the stuff that doesn't get covered, PTSD gets a tremendous amount of coverage, which it should.
Yeah.
So I was going to embed with the chaplain corps, but my timing was off in that the drawdown in Afghanistan was underway, and there were very few embeds that were not. They had to be daily journalists, so I wasn't able to do that. So it tends to be the kind of the more esoteric stuff. Although some of it is straightforward, like extreme heat and extreme noise and heavy loads and panic and fear and how do you like training combat medics and Navy corpsmen to do the work that they need to do in these extreme stress environments. And that was fascinating.
Yeah, let's actually talk about the hearing thing, because that was a really interesting problem. They're wearing hearing protection at times, but that also prevents them from being as effective in a combat situation.
Right. Yeah, because you can certainly protect easily enough with foam earplugs or ear cuffs. But when you do that, you lose your what they call situational awareness. And that is like, is there somebody driving up behind you in an SUV that you can't hear the tires on the gravel or the engine? Is somebody talking to you, telling you to get down? Do you hear someone around the corner? All of that. I mean, I think 50 to 60% of situational awareness is through your hearing, and that's relevant if you're riding a bike down the road or if you're on a foot patrol in Afghanistan. And the other thing that was interesting is on a foot patrol, they're at least 15 feet apart because that's the killing radius. There's a term for you. The killing radius of a grenade. So, you don't want soldiers walking in a cluster of 3 because then one grenade could kill 3 people. And if they're more spread out, only one would be injured or killed. So they're walking far apart. So just to have a conversation becomes difficult if you're protecting your hearing. Plus, when things get loud, there's no, on a foot patrol, say, there's not necessarily warning. Just a firefight breaks out, somebody starts shooting, a bomb goes off. You don't have any warning. So what are you going to do? Wear the hearing protection the entire 6 hours that you're out? No. It's uncomfortable. It compromises your sense of what's going on around you, and they're hot if you're wearing cuffs. So anyway, that's a conundrum for the military because hearing loss it's the number one VA disability payout, $1 billion a year. So it'd be great if there were something you could do. And there is a pretty cool system it's called TCAPS, Tactical Communication and Protection System. And what that does is sound comes in and it reproduces it selectively. The loud sounds are diminished and the quiet sounds are amplified. So the system knows to do that. There's also a mouthpiece, and you can communicate wirelessly with other people in the unit or someone overhead in a helicopter. So if everybody had those, that would be great. Right now, everybody doesn't. Special operations teams do. There's a priority system for that. But the people that I talked to were pushing for that to be made more available.
Uh-huh. You're talking about the ground patrols in Afghanistan and whatnot. And I'm actually listening to the latest Serial podcast, which is about U.S. Army soldier taken prisoner in Afghanistan. Yeah. But the search, so these guys were searching for weeks on end, like away from their base, like sleeping in their trucks or under trees or whatnot, in searching for this guy. And they're talking in the interviews about, getting diarrhea early on or buying local goats and then having like one pair of clothes or 2 pairs of clothes, and one's ripped and one has diarrhea in it. And I was like, wow, it's a very, it's such a simple thing, and it's like causing these huge problems.
The rates of diarrhea in special operations units are twice as high, and it's already fairly high among deployed troops because they're on base. There's not very much food poisoning because there's no flies. The dining facilities are sealed. There's air conditioning. But people get sick of Taco Tuesday and spaghetti, and they go eat in restaurants in town, and then they get sick because their immune system isn't used to it. It may not have been refrigerated. There's more flies. The drinking water supply might not be safe. Yes, so it's a big problem. And you can imagine if you're a special operations unit and you've got a pretty critical, high-risk mission going down, you can't stop and go either hide behind a rock or change your clothes. And I talked to some special operations guys, and, they're like, it sounds like a silly topic, and it was sort of an awkward thing to broach, particularly as it was over dinner, because that's the only time the special operations guys come out of the restricted area and mingle with anybody else. Actually, they don't mingle very much. They keep to themselves. So I had to sit down and say, hi, I'd like to talk about diarrhea. I know it sounds like a silly thing. And, he just looked at me and said, it's not. You're welcome to sit down. And it's, he couldn't give me details. He couldn't do there I was, because it's all classified. But, at one point he said, look, I've soiled my pants in Iraq. I've soiled my pants in Afghanistan. I don't know what you want from me. It's just, that's what happens. And then the person I was with goes, well, then what? And he's like, well, it's kind of a life or death scenario. You don't stop. You just keep going. That's what you do. Anyway, so I was traveling with a researcher from the Navy who was testing a 1-dose regimen of anti-diarrhea. Rifaximin was one of them. There were 3 different types he was testing to see if you could just do it 1 dose and be done with it and get back on your feet quickly. Thereby also, hopefully, there'd be less time for antibiotic-resistant strains to develop.
That was my next question.
Kind of 2 advantages to it. Yeah.
Because a lot of people, knowing what they know about antibiotic resistance, will just wait it out.
Yes.
And take a...
Yeah, I mean, that's fine for most people, I think. Particularly if it's, I don't mean if it's like cholera or typhoid fever, but for travelers' diarrhea, sure, there's, you wait it out. I mean, I don't like to take antibiotics. I just would rather leave my microbiome intact. But if you're, if you've got a job that you can't step away from, then I can certainly understand why you would.
Was that effective, the 1 dose?
Yeah, it was turning out to be. I don't think at the time I visited, they hadn't finished it was a clinical trial, and he was sort of midway through it. They were taking data in South America, Djibouti, and I would think Egypt maybe, or Thailand. I don't know. There's a number of Navy medical research units, and they were all collecting data.
And that conversation you were referring to with the special ops guy, that was on a base somewhere. Was that in Djibouti?
That was in Djibouti, yeah. Yeah, I traveled all the way to Djibouti to talk about diarrhea.
So the Army and the Armed Forces were they pretty welcoming to your research and writing?
They were. These are stories and research that doesn't get a lot of coverage, and I think they're stories they feel good about. I don't think there's a downside to it. I mean, I wouldn't be their first pick to tell the stories, certainly, because I'm a bit of a
wild card.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say loose cannon, but that was too military. Wild card is better. I'm a wild card, but they were willing to take that chance. And sometimes it wasn't that people were saying no; it's that nobody knew who was the person who had the authority to say yes, because they were sort of odd requests. So there was a lot of, it's okay by me, but you need to ask someone else. And sometimes just like they'd say, you need to talk to AFRICOM. No, you need to talk to CENTCOM. Oh, no, you need to talk to the Office of the Secretary of Defense. No, just ask the public affairs guy on the ground. And it turns out with Djibouti, that's what it was. It was just, I spent about 3 weeks emailing dozens of people just to find who's the person who can sign off on this. And it turned out it was this guy on the ground, the public affairs guy, who I said, how did you make this happen? He goes, well, I saw these emails flying around for about a week and a half, and I thought, this is not like diarrhea. You can't just hydrate and wait for it to go away. She's not going to go away.
Mary Roach,
so,
not like diarrhea.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of going out of impromptu right now, but I also remembered the story, the section about the fashion designers, which was, I thought, an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, me too. That there is a fashion studio and that there are people with fashion degrees was a surprise to me. The woman that I spoke to, Annette Lafleur, had a background. She had done swimwear design, which struck me at first as an odd transition. And then she explained, actually, with swimwear, it's very much a situation of form following function. It's a high active endeavor, clothing that you're wearing while you do a specific activity. That's how the fabric has to fit the activity. It's got to interact with water. It's got to dry quickly. So there are all of these things that the garment has to do other than look cool. It's very much practical clothing, swimwear. And then the other woman there had worked for Priscilla's of Boston, which was wedding gowns. Wedding gowns. She was talking about, she said it's wedding gowns are specialty fabrics, and there's a lot of layering. So it is actually kind of similar to some of the protective gear, like a bomb suit or a chem bio protective gear, because there'll be a layer of activated charcoal, and then there's like an outer layer that's been treated so it's super shedding, so stuff rolls off. So the things that they had done actually, oddly enough, kind of were good background for designing military garments.
Yeah. And I remember something sticking out about, zippers or Velcro or snaps or like loop closures.
Yeah.
And Velcro could like give you away if you were a sniper or something like that.
Yeah, because it's loud. Yeah. They're one of the things on the wish list at Natick Labs in Massachusetts, where they do this uniform work. They would like to have a quieter hook and loop fastener. In other words, Velcro. Velcro is the trade name. There are probably others, but I don't know if they're working on it, but that's definitely on their to-do list, is a quieter Velcro, because Velcro is great because it's flat. So if you're lying on it, as a sniper might, you wouldn't want something that closes up zips up the chest or buttons, because you're lying down on the buttons. And Velcro is flatter. It's loud, which doesn't always matter for a sniper, but sometimes.
As someone who's lived in Montana, I'm a big fan of pearl snap shirts. Well, I'm actually wearing a pearl snap cowboy shirt right now, but I always thought, what if we made magnetic pearl snaps and they could be real nice and quiet?
Oh, yeah. Anyway. That's right. Because snap is loud. Wait, so what's the advantage of a pearl snap over a snap?
I think it just looks.
Right.
But
yeah, right. But a snap is easier than a button, or it's tight. It's more reliable. Why do cowboys have those snaps?
Mary Roach curiosity coming through right there. Why do cowboys wear snaps? I don't know.
I don't either.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up later, and I'll let you know.
Okay, let me know.
Oh, that's fun. What else would you like to talk about? This is all great stuff.
Tell me. Yeah. Well, you tell me. Help me think of a new book idea. I don't know what the next book is going to be. I don't know. A lot of things have been done, and sometimes people say, "Oh, you should write about sleep." I get this all the time: sleep and pot or alcohol. But the problem with all those things for me is that they're internal states for the most part. The interesting parts of it are things that you need to be the person either sleeping and dreaming or smoking the pot or being drunk for the most part. Otherwise, what would I be describing? Be like, and now here I am in the lab and there's a guy lying down with electrodes on his head asleep. And here we are and there's another guy lying down asleep with some electrodes. I don't know.
The first thing I thought of was the human mind, and the meditators that I've had on this podcast, or various articles I've read about monks that can pull a truck with their penis or get stabbed without the blade going in, or like bricks. They're training their mind, and then they end up with these real physical, almost magical characteristics.
Yeah. I covered the truck pulling penis guys.
Oh, you did?
Briefly in Bonk. Only in passing, sadly. I didn't interview any of them. You did. How do they
Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't interview a truck pulling guy. I was just thinking about all the various
okay. I was excited about that because I want to know how those guys do that. I mean, I know that mental training can certainly enable you to withstand pain, et cetera. But I'm just thinking like physically, how do they from pulling it off? I mean, that just anyway, in not like actually losing the member. That was my question that I don't know the answer to. But
and another thing that popped into my mind that you might be the perfect person to answer is there's a quote that says something like, to a sufficiently advanced civilization, their technology would appear like magic to us. And maybe exploring the paranormal and magic, things that we don't yet understand scientifically, but that potentially could be explained scientifically. A lot of people that I know on the sort of spiritual side of the conversation, I sort of get this feeling that science and spirituality will start to intersect, but we don't have the proper tools to measure some things yet.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. And I think there's from Spook, which was kind of the intersection of science and people applying scientific method to look at the soul or the afterlife or the spirit. Not only do we not have the
21
tools,
grams thing.
Yeah, your 21 grams thing was part of it. Not only do we not have the tools, but the attitude isn't quite there. There are only two universities in the US that I went to, because there are only two universities that have a parapsychology program, and one of them, there's one that has a huge endowment, or did then. Chester Carlson, the inventor of the Xerox machine, his wife was very much interested in the perseverance of the personality after death, and she left a lot of money to University of Virginia to study specifically that. But after Spook came out, not because of Spook, but after it came out, the researchers in that department were told, you can continue doing this work because there's a lot of money attached to it. Please don't talk about it to the press. Please don't speak about what you do. It was considered embarrassing. I don't think it should be. I think if you're intelligent and you know how to set up a study and control it. Well, I mean, they looked at near-death experience. They looked at University of Arizona had brought in a couple of mediums. I mean, that research was a little bit crankier, but the stuff that they were doing in Virginia seemed totally legitimate. I felt bad for them. I think they felt they were made to feel a little marginalized. Yeah. So that would need to change. I mean, in the 60s, there were more. Duke had the parapsychology lab. There were other labs. Now there's Edinburgh, I think, still has one. University of Edinburgh.
I seem to remember Dan Brown introducing, what does he call it? Noetic science in one of his Da Vinci Code series books that was supposed to change the way we thought about
there was
humanity.
The Institute of Noetic Science, I remember seeing over in Sausalito. I used to write for a magazine that was headquartered in the same building, and I remember seeing the door that said Institute for Noetic Science. I don't know if they're still there. I think that there's one of the Apollo astronauts had been involved in that. Scott Carpenter.
Yeah,
was it Scott Carpenter? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is fun. This is a great brainstorming book ideas.
Yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful.
Let's touch on one more topic from Grunt before we wrap up. Let's talk about the whole maggots in the wounds thing, because that's a fun, gross topic.
Maggots. The military maggot story starts in World War I. There was a surgeon, William Baer, who was part of the French Expeditionary Force, and he treated a couple of soldiers who came in with these big wounds, deep wounds, infested with maggots, and he and his nursing staff cleaned out the wounds, and Baer noticed that the tissue that was growing in, there was this healthy pink tissue, there was no infection. And he sees this over and over, and he starts to think something about the maggots, and he realizes they're practicing a form of debridement, which is taking away the dead tissue. They eat selectively. Maggots eat they prefer dead tissue. That's why you see them on dead bodies. So the maggots would be in there eating the dead tissue, which facilitated growth of new tissue and prevented infection, as the dead tissue can't fight infection, so it encourages infection to sort of set in. So the maggots were doing this fairly miraculous thing, and Baer noticed it, and also about 10 years later began using it on civilians who had stubborn wounds that were continuing to be infected. That was kind of where it got its start, and it's still used. Maggots today are an FDA-approved medical device. They are available by prescription, and they're mostly used diabetic populations for foot ulcers that won't heal. And so there was a wonderful medical entomologist named George Peck, who was at Walter Reed and was doing some research trying to show that maggots were a good way to, in cases of recurrent infection with IED, because IEDs, what happens with a buried explosive is that the explosive blasts sand and dirt and debris deep into the limb, and then the flesh and tissue comes back down over the dirt and debris. So you get a lot of infection, recurring infection. And his feeling was, let's see if the maggots are better at it than surgically debriding the wound. It was an uphill battle for him. There's a lot of resistance to using maggots, partly because they seem sort of anachronistic, and partly because they're maggots. And the nursing staff has to go in and change the maggots every few days because they get bigger and they want to leave and pupate, and you don't want them pupating in a hospital because they become flies. And because they're maggots, and it's gross for people to deal with them.
Yeah.
And, surgical debridement works fairly well most of the time, and somebody has a healthy immune system. So it's not being done much at Walter Reed, if at all. But that was what George Peck, who has a very endearing love for maggots. He invited me to dinner. He said, I will raise a clutch of maggots for you. And I'll time it so that when you arrive, they'll be just the same size as we would introduce them to a wound. So he did that. And, after dinner, he comes into the room with this little cut glass dish, which looks like it has chocolate pudding, but in fact is raw liver with that clutch of maggots feeding there. And we had an interesting conversation.
Wow. And, I admire your, I guess I said this already, but I admire your ability to appreciate and not get grossed out by all these things.
Yeah, well, on the first presentation, I must admit there's a little, because they're sort of seething, they're all clustered tight in together. They dive in head first, they breathe through their ass. They are just an eating machine, and they're like kind of almost pulsating there, and this all head down. Wow. They don't look like worms. They kind of look like accordion buttons or something there, because you just see their butt ends. They're head down, immersed in their food. Serious eaters, career eaters, the maggot.
How about that?
How about that?
What would you say? This is my last question before I ask my last question. What would you say your overall feeling about soldiers in the military is currently?
Well, I had a sense when I started the book, the military is sort of this monolithic perpetrator of war, and I don't have now. I don't have a view of one entity. That happens if you immerse yourself in any organization. You start to see there's, like NASA. There's 5 different NASAs just based on whether you're at Johnson Space Center or Ames or Marshall or wherever you are. And same with the military. There are the policymakers and the politicians and the generals, and then there's the men and women who are out there doing the hard and dangerous work, and then there's these lovely folks that I spent time with who are the scientists and the surgeons and the medical people, and they're smart and very caring and committed people. So, I don't like war any better than I did before the book, but I have a fondness for those folks in the military.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I've got 2 questions that I ask all of my guests, and I'll ask you those now. The first is, if you could change or add something to the world, what would you wish for the world to have?
If I could change the world in some way, I would like to require that anybody, before they can make any kind of generalization about another population, whether it's an ethnic group or gender or race or whatever, I think they have to be required to sit down and have dinner with that person, a representative of that group that they have this generalized feeling about, which gets back to something we were talking about earlier. That whether you hate or you're disgusted, or when you have a reaction based on not knowing anything about this other group, whether it's maggots or Republicans. Before you're allowed to form that opinion and mouth off about it, you have to sit down and have dinner with one person.
Yeah.
Oh, I love maggot.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'll probably avoid dinner with a maggot. Thank you very much.
I did it for you.
Good. Yes. Final question is, what is your definition of adventure?
Oh, my definition of adventure doesn't involve travel. I mean, my 20s, it definitely did. I was the kind of person like, open the atlas, blank spot on the map. I want to go there. What's there? Like curiosity of like, what is it? What's there? I don't even know it's there. That could be in your backyard as well. So adventure, I think stepping through a door beyond which you don't really know what's there and how it's going to go.
Beautiful.
That's kind of long-winded.
Love it. So where can people find you online? And obviously they can buy Grunt in bookstores everywhere. I saw it at the library the other day, so that's made it out.
It's in the library. Yeah, bookstores, libraries, online. Yeah.
And where should they go to find you online?
Twitter is Mary_Roach, and my website is maryroach.net. And I'm appearing a couple more. The tour is the website. There's still some more events.
Yes, including tonight. Well, this will be published in the future, but tonight in Oakland. Yeah,
tonight in Oakland, and tomorrow night in San Francisco at West Portal Books. But this will be later, so those will be in the past.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they will have gone fabulously. And Mary, I just want to say thank you and acknowledge you for writing these great books and, having dinner with maggots and doing all this stuff so that we don't have to, and presenting it to us with humor. And so I love your work, and I know a lot of other people do. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. Thanks. It was really fun to talk. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks again. Bye-bye. All right. That was really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. There's the famous quote, all men are created equal, but some are more equal than others. And, I feel the same way. I'm not supposed to pick favorite episodes, but that one was one of my favorite episodes that I've done for sure. I really loved the insight into her writing process. We don't see the behind the scenes work of emailing people in the military for 3 weeks until finally someone says, okay, you can come talk to a special ops guy about diarrhea. There's a lot of, the first 3 months that she's talking about mapping out these book projects and seeing what's interesting, seeing where she can go. Really a lot of work goes into creating the stories and creating the final product that we all love. I'm glad she thinks that scientists are interesting people in general. I still consider myself to be a scientist a little bit. And it's also good to have the latest updates on the status of penis transplants. Stuff you never knew that you wanted to know, right here on The Art of Adventure. Now I'd like to quickly talk to you guys about Adventure Quest. I mentioned it briefly at the beginning of this podcast in the introduction, but I want to tell you a little bit more about it. The idea is sort of a takeoff of the Native American Vision Quest, where they go out for 4 days with no food and sit in nature and meditate and essentially wait for a vision to happen. And they're not really moving from a single spot. And I'm not gonna be doing that, but we will have the opportunity to spend a day fasting or spend a day in silence in the wilderness. And what I've found over the years is that there's something about being a human out walking in nature that allows you to connect with something inside yourself. Of course, walking is a form of meditation, as Jono Lenine said in episode 100. And there's a lot we can gain as people going through these experiences together and by ourselves. And what better place to do this than in Bali, where there's lush rainforests and canyons and waterfalls and volcanoes and a really diverse experience. And so what I want to give you guys is the chance to join me on a week-long adventure and a quest to learn about ourselves and propel ourselves into the next phase of our life. That's what I see this quest is, the delineation from who you used to be into the person you will become. So if that sounds like fun, all on a tropical paradise with yours truly, then head over to derekloudermilk.com/adventurequest and sign up. And I'd love to just chat with you in person a little bit more if you're curious about exactly what is going to happen. And I hope to see a very small handful of you guys there. It's a very exclusive little group that I'm putting together, and it's going to be great. Now, thanks for listening to today's episode with Mary Roach. Again, so awesome to finally get to talk with her. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.